Alright guys, so this is a video recapping the 2018 season as far as recruiting goes for the SEC. And we're going to start with the team that ranked last in the SEC in recruiting, Arkansas. They finished with 16 total recruits, 2 4-stars, and 14 3-stars. They had a poor season, did relatively little at the early signing period, fired their head coach, and signed a very good replacement, but too late to really get anything done in this offseason. Arkansas is not expected to compete next year or in the immediate future. Moving on to the team that ranked 13th in the SEC in recruiting is Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt finished with 3 4-stars and 15 3-stars. They are also, like Arkansas, they didn't do a whole lot on the recruiting trail. They had to compete with late surges from both Florida and Georgia. Georgia being a dominant force in recruiting all year. They were relatively competitive in the SEC. They were a good mid-tier team in the SEC, and they'll continue to be that for the time being. Moving on to the next team on our list of SEC teams is Missouri. They compiled 26 total recruits, none of whom were either 5 nor 4 stars, with 26 3-star recruits. Missouri, they're not going to be very good next year. They're losing a lot of talent. They are going to be very good on the offensive side of the ball, but as has been in the past, they're going to be a sponge on defense. They're not going to do a whole lot of stopping anybody. Moving on to Kentucky, finished their season 11th in recruiting in the SEC with 4 3-star recruits and 21 3-star recruits. They didn't make a whole lot of noise this season. They had a hot start and petered off like they have in the past 2 seasons. I expect more of the same from Kentucky. They're going to be a bowl-eligible team next year, but not a whole lot more. And next on our list is number 10 with Ole Miss. They had 4 3-star recruits and 17 4-star recruits, and 17 3-stars with a total of 21 recruits. They're losing a lot to transfers, and after the resignation of Hugh Freeze, they lost a whole lot to transfer, including Shea Patterson, who's going to majorly impact the way Ole Miss plays next year. Next is, oddly enough, Mississippi State. They finished 9th in the SEC with 6 4-star recruits and 17 3-star recruits for a total of 23 commits. Mississippi State, they were a bully to everyone not named Georgia, Alabama, or Auburn. They're a good mid-upper tier school in the SEC, and there's a lot of question marks, including the new coaching staff, so we will see where they go from there. And number 8 is Tennessee. They had 8 4-star recruits and 14 3-star recruits. Tennessee they weren't very good at all last year. Tennessee had a lot of problems, the front of which came from their head coach and Butch Jones. He had a lack of control over that team, and it showed on the field with a lack of discipline. They brought in Jeremy Pruitt. He's going to turn this program around eventually, which is a easier said than done task, but with the way he recruited this offseason, you have to think he has a very good foundation to bring Tennessee back to relevance in the SEC. Up next is South Carolina at number 7. They had 22 total recruits, with 9 of them being 4-star and 13 of them being 3-star. South Carolina, they were a very good football team this year. Will Muschamp has been trending the right way. He's got a good staff around him, and he's going to keep these guys competitive for as long as he possibly can. And they're only going to get better next year. They're going to get better on the recruiting trail, and they are going to do everything they possibly can to try and unseat Georgia in the SEC East this year. Next we have Texas A&M at number 6. They have 23 total recruits, 13 4-stars, and 10 3-stars. Texas A&M fired Kevin Sumlin this past season, replaced him with Jimbo Fisher from Florida State. He is another Nick Saban acolyte. He is going to turn Texas A&M into what Florida State was. They're going to be a good offensive school and a good defensive school. And if he can fight Tom Herman well for the talent that's in Texas, Texas A&M is going to turn into a power in the very near future. At number 5 is LSU. They finished with 22 total recruits, 1 of which was a 5-star, 12 of which were 4-stars, and 9 of which had 3-stars. LSU got in their own way a lot to start this season. They really turned it around against Florida after they lost to Troy. They then went on to upset Florida and Auburn in consecutive weeks. And Coach Orgeron finally put the game in the hands of his coordinators, and it paid dividends. The offense slightly improved and the defense vastly improved. And that's how LSU wants to play football, and that's how they're going to continue to play football. At number 4 is Florida. They had 12 4-star recruits, 7 3-star recruits, for a total of 19 commits. Florida was not doing well on the recruiting trail under Jim McElwain. Schools like Florida State, Miami, Alabama, Georgia, Auburn were living in Florida's backyard as far as recruits went. He lost Byron Cowart to Auburn, managed to win C.C. Jefferson that year, but outside of that, hasn't done a whole lot of note in the SEC in recruiting. They fired Coach McElwain and replaced him with Dan Mullen from Mississippi State, who is a very good recruiter who now has a large pool of talent to pull from. And he did just that in his first off-season, as Florida's head coach. He pulled Emory Jones from Heard County. He is a very good dual-threat quarterback, and he's going to be Coach Mullen's first major steal as a recruiter. And next on our list At number 3 is the University of Auburn, who probably had the quietest offseason of any school as far as recruiting goes. They still managed to finish number 3 behind Alabama and Georgia. They brought in 24 total recruits, 16 of whom were 4 stars and 8 of whom were 3 stars. They did what they normally do. They recruited strong in the state of Alabama and pulled in some major recruits from outside the state. They brought in a few key recruits such as Quindarius Monday, who has a chance to step in and compete day one for a starting job. They also brought in Asa Martin, who is in the same position. And another key recruit who is going to have time to sit and develop is going to be Joey Gatewood. He's a very good dual threat quarterback. If you have not seen him, I highly recommend that you go watch some of his highlight films. Auburn is going to continue to do what they do until they can manage to break through and beat out Georgia or Alabama for some major recruits. And at number 2 in the SEC is the University of Alabama with 2 5-star recruits, 12 4-star recruits, and 5 3-star recruits for a total of 19 total commitments. Alabama has had some major questions on their roster this year that I don't know if they necessarily got answered this year. They were weak on the defensive line and lost Bobby Brown to Texas A&M, which certainly didn't help matters. Their linebackers are very few and far between, and they really didn't do a whole lot to address that this year. Their secondary, they did help when they brought in the number 1 cornerback in the country. His name escapes me. Let's see. Yeah. And at number 1 is Georgia. Georgia shocked a lot of people on the football side of things this year, and they continued to do that in the recruiting portion of the season, where they hauled in a national record 8 5-stars. They hauled in to complement that 15 4-stars and 4 3-star recruits for a total of 26 commitments. The keys of some of this class are obviously Justin Fields, the number 1 overall prospect in the country. Zamir White, he is the number 1 running back in the country. And Jamari Saylor is going to be another good offensive lineman for Georgia. They certainly need help in that department. Losing Isaiah Wynn to the NFL, who was a major piece on their offensive line last year. I don't believe he allowed a single sack last year, so that's going to be huge for them losing. They're going to have to do some work to replace him. And that is that's a quick recap of all the schools in the SEC. Obviously, as you can see, I have my bias, but the SEC is continuing to flourish as far as recruiting goes, and will continue to do so until the conference can come into our territory and beat us out for recruits, which so far is currently not happening with anyone besides Clemson. So until then, the SEC is continuing to be the best conference in the country, the deepest conference in the country, and I don't foresee that changing at the moment. This has been the Common Man Review. This has been my thoughts on the SEC after National Signing Day. I'll talk to you guys later.